Hello, my name is Darlene Robbins, President of the Northeast Pennsylvania Manufacturers and Employers Association. Today I would like to share with you one of our executive roundtables, where Pat Caulfield, Executive Director of the Schuylkill County Municipal Authority, presented on the topic of utility infrastructure and economic development. If you build it, they will come. We would like to thank Pat and the rest of the staff at the Municipal Authority for taking the time to educate our members. Enjoy the presentation.
Tone of our discussion today, I titled, "If you build it, they will come." Probably the first thing that comes to your mind is the 1996, I believe, Kevin Costner movie where built the infamous Field of Dreams in the middle of nowhere, and lo and behold, some really neat things happened afterwards when everyone thought he was crazy. When we look at it in terms of our discussion today, if you build it in terms of infrastructure, and we're going to talk about that, could mean a number of different things. Our focus at the Schuylkill County Municipal Authority is potable water treatment, fire protection, and supply, and also wastewater collection, conveyance, and disposal. And if you build it, they will come. This is one of the very successful projects and one of our endeavors that we're going to focus on as the presentation continues. Some of our topic discussion points that we'd like to announce is the direct correlation between utility infrastructure and economic development, the importance of all utility infrastructure capacity when recruiting new development, and that could mean potable water and fire protection, sanitary sewer treatment for domestic and industrial waste streams, electric power supply, natural gas supply, communications, fiber optic, broadband internet. They're all very important when you're not only recruiting new development to come to, in our case, the county, but how we're going to talk about it today is our history and some case studies of SDMA's successful partnerships and how we made that happen successfully to not only create new jobs, but also to retain existing jobs. We're going to talk about some of our current projects, and again, one of the feedback points that we've got leading into today was, in our business, you're in it, and you just, I guess, assume that people know what's going on or follow it in the newspapers, but a lot of times we get hit with questions and actually comments that, wow, we really didn't even understand what you guys have been doing or what you're doing currently. So it's important to get that education out to the business community and especially to the industry. And then finally, I'd like to talk about the future of Schuylkill County development. So speaking of the direct correlation, how do we measure success? Previously documented studies that evaluate all kinds of indicators. So anyone can Google economic development infrastructure, and you're going to find all kinds of reports, not only nationally but worldwide, on how we measure success. And some of the more metropolitan areas have all kind of fancy ways to do it. Median household income levels, and this is all data driven. Percent of labor force employed, population change with increase, assessed valuation per capita value. Well, typically in Schuylkill County, as we all know, as the lead-in, we're somewhat of an anomaly. We're a little bit of a curve buster. Sometimes we get looked on, we're behind the times a little bit, but sometimes there's a lot of value to what this county, especially, I think, brings. So that being the case, the way we look at it, or the way I look at it, is job creation, but also commercial industrial development. That's super important to our community and super important to our future. Job retention, that's something I think gets overlooked. A lot of times when you talk about economic development, the discussion is always the business parks and the empty lots, and how could we bring new in, or we have an empty shell building and how could we fill it? Well, there's also some very successful industries that have retained jobs for hundreds of years, or well over 100 years, and that's as important, if not more important, than new job creation. Tax revenue to local municipalities, the county and the school district. This is a huge issue, and again, dating back to our time in this room, we had the High Ridge Business Park. We're going to talk about that in depth as the presentation goes along. But when you at first there were some critics of that type of thing, where, geez, you're going to give these guys tax breaks, and oh my God, no taxes for 10 years. That's a lifetime. And wow, you blink an eye, and now as we laugh about it, there's a a green river flowing down from High Ridge into the Minersville School District and to some of the local townships up there, and it's a good green. Finally, the ripple effect, and that's reinvestment into the local economy. When investment into commercial development, industrial development does occur, there are so many ripple effects, and that's something that I'm not telling you guys that you don't know. But everything from fuel in the local gas stations through parts and repairs and the local services that are provided, everyone benefits through that development. We'll talk a little bit and lead us in. Who is SCMA, Schuylkill County Municipal Authority? We're formed in 1961 after the purchase of the former Pottsville Water Company. They had formed in 1834. This is actually a neat picture. Some of you folks in the room may recognize that. That's the original supply of water in the city of Pottsville. That's now the Bicentennial Park up at 10th and Norwegian, in between Norwegian and Von Tunga Street. That's now it served as the original Pottsville water supply. They ran a line from that spring house downtown to Center Street, and some of the first development was in that area. That was actually in 1834, and this year we're celebrating our 181st year in business. So we're pretty proud about that. This is, I think, Frank, is that Ned Connors? Still on the board? Who is SCMA? We're the county's largest water and wastewater purveyor. We serve in 25 different municipalities in Schuylkill County out of the 67. We own and operate 6 drinking water treatment facilities. We treat over 5.3 million gallons of drinking water a day. We have 7 reservoirs, 8 deep wells, 13 wastewater pumping stations, and 10 above ground storage tanks. And well over 150 miles of distribution lines that we maintain. We're also heavily into the wastewater treatment facilities and the wastewater treatment industry. We have 4 wastewater treatment plants that treat over 2.5 million gallons a day, 16 pumping stations, and at least 110 miles of collection lines. We also contract operate with 2 additional treatment facilities, and that's in the borough of Wardsburg. We entered into an agreement in the borough 2 years ago. So they retain ownership of their facilities, however they contract operate the responsibility for those plants to SCMA. So that's a relationship that we're able to forge, and it's working out very well. Also, who is SCMA? This is probably what we're most famously known for. I always throw this slide in there as an attention getter right before lunchtime. Knowing the county residents, we always get a little charge out of that. But Yuengling Brewery, of course, is our largest customer. So when Dick Yuengling was thinking about expanding his business in the late 90s into the early 2000s, one of the reasons he built another brewery in Port Carbon / Pottsville, let's call it, was because of the water quality. And he has the water chemistry down to a science from the original plant on Von Tunga Street. And we have plenty of supply, and we had plenty of capacity, and that was realistically one of the reasons that Dick built his additional brewery and stayed on SCMA water. He has now since built another brewery in Tampa. Obviously, we can't pipe down to Tampa, so but what they did, it's funny, their treatment system that they put in the brewery in Tampa, they tried to mimic the water quality in Schuylkill County because they have their brewing process so fine-tuned into our water quality, which is very consistent. A little bit about then and now. These are actual pictures. That was the Indian Run Dam on the west end of Pottsville. They actually had a movable rail line installed and would move that. Back then in 1929, there was no equipment that was able to be on tracks and on cats and bulldozers and loaders and dump trucks. It was literally done by rail car. Today we do things a little bit differently. Here's a little shot of one of our main breaks that we were recently repairing. Again, back to our former stakeholders and actually stockholders of the Pottsville Water Company. Looks a little different today. There you go, Dad. There's an updated picture. Frank, John. Yeah, a little bit. We are governed by a board of directors of 7. They are appointed by our county commissioners. Another picture, there's Indian Run again. There's literally a steam locomotive doing the excavation of our Indian Run Dam. And again, a little different on how we do things today. Excuse me, today. Our service area, this is a quick map. Looking at it, it's not an entire map of the county, but it's a good section of it. 81, of course, is the red line crossing up through. 61 coming down through. The Pottsville Water Company started out its general service area, of course, in downtown Pottsville, but we've significantly expanded, again, as noted, 25 different municipalities. We go as far north as the 81 corridor. We have all the water treatment from the Schuylkill Mall complex, the 3 different prison facilities, all the way east to the Route 54, Route 54 and 81 interchange. We also have satellite systems down in the Tremont area. And then southerly, we serve in Pine Brook and just completed a new project in the Deer Lake area, and Auburn is a bulk customer of ours. So the general consensus of our treatment and our distribution is centered around the center part of the county. What I'd like to talk about now is some of the partnerships that we were able to develop at the Schuylkill County Municipal Authority, which is super critically important to economic development. Some of those partnerships, of course, we would be remiss to not call out our local legislators and our senators. That's something that is super important when you're competing against other states, literally, for new customers and economic development. And our state in the past has been able to put together Governor's Action Team, the Department of Community Economic Development. There are critical funding agencies that are able to pump money into these types of development and offer packages such as KOZs and KOEZs and LERDAs and tax abatement that's able to recruit these customers. So again, tip our hat to our legislators. Our county government, have one of our commissioners here today, Gary Hess. The commissioners, and again, this dates back when it becomes a realization how important economic development is. There are concessions and there are tough decisions that have to be made from an electable standpoint, and thankfully our county has been able to work across party lines to be able to put Schuylkill County first and to be able to promote these economic development projects. SEDCO, our local economic development corporation, again, and then finally, PennVest. Some of you may not know what PennVest is, Pennsylvania Infrastructure Investment Authority. That is our primary lending vehicle, our primary supplier of funds for water and wastewater infrastructure that we do. It's a state revolving fund, which is a neat concept that came up in the late 80s into the early 90s when there was a huge change to the Safe Drinking Water Act that promoted the construction of a number of drinking water treatment facilities, filtration plants, quite honestly. And when a regulation goes in place like that, if there's not a funding vehicle to chase it, a lot of these smaller communities, smaller boroughs, smaller municipalities just don't have the funding nor the municipal backing to be able to go out and privately get loans or float bonds to do these projects. We like to consider ourselves a poster child for PennVest and the revolving fund. It's typically set up for distressed communities or low-income level communities that have an environmental issue that they cannot treat effectively or according to permit, or they cannot supply, or depending on water, wastewater, and they provide a funding vehicle for you at low interest loans, or in some cases grant money. But the nice thing about it is, as you're paying that money back, that all gets reinvested and re-loaned out. So that being the case, we, the Schuylkill County Municipal Authority, since 1991, have done $117 million worth of water and wastewater projects. Again, to me, that's a shocker. That's a number that jumps off the page. I don't know how many companies, let alone authorities in Schuylkill County for sure, maybe even the state of Pennsylvania, have done that number and that quantity. These projects will directly or indirectly link to, best calculated, over 6,500 jobs. And that's some of the data that we've gotten from the Economic Development Corporation of not only new jobs, but also, again, retained jobs. And we only looked at some of the larger employers in the county. We didn't drill down into the commercial storefronts in downtown Pottsville and St. Clair and Ordsburg. But generally speaking, that was a guesstimate. One of the other things the Schuylkill County Municipal Authority has also done over the years, and this is more so the past dozen years or so, is acquired 8 different failing or non-compliant systems. And this is something that we're going to talk about, and especially in the future part of our discussion. You know, back in the 70s when the Clean Water Act was promoted and actually put into place from the federal government, that's when a lot of the sewage plants were built. And there was significant grant funding to do those projects. So the prototypical example would be a small community or a borough, and the borough would create an authority. That authority would build a plant and run that plant, and it was typically a 30-year bond. So everybody had this misconception that, geez, wow, this is a cash cow. All we got to do is pay off that bond and we are home free. This is going to be able to pave roads and hire more police and put new lights at the Little League field. Not the case. First of all, there's legislation that doesn't allow you to do that, but second of all, after 30 years, you need a new plant. And what happens then is the cost of a new plant in 2016 dollars exceeds the borrowing capacity for that authority. So now what do they do? They have to go back to the borough. A lot of times that exceeds the borrowing power and the financial backing that the borough is not willing to write and anchor their tax, which is their only method of revenue, to one single treatment plant project. So now what? We're stuck. Now the plant's falling apart. We're not meeting permit regulation, DEP or EPA, and this doesn't matter. Drinking water, wastewater, same difference. Now we have a problem. So what happens? How do we fix that? One of the ways that we've been able to do that successfully at the Schuylkill County Municipal Authority is regionalized. And the beauty of our authority is that we are a county authority. Our charter and our incorporation allows us to serve anywhere in the county. So what we were able to do is acquire these failing authorities, failing in terms of financial, sometimes failing in terms of environmental, either way, and roll them in and have our borrowing power be able to construct these large upgrade projects. But as the old adage goes, the more hands, the lighter the load. That size project for a single 3,000 population community versus a county authority that serves well over 35,000 is able to be secured through Penvest. Penvest, with 117 successful $1 million already loaned out to us, we've never missed a payment. Our borrowing power is obviously a lot stronger in a smaller community.
So Pat, are they partnerships above and beyond the 25 that you presently work with?
No, they're included in 25. Some of those, Darlene, that's a good question. Some of those were authorities, public authorities, be it a sewer authority or a water authority. Some of them were actually private. And we'll talk about those as the presentation.
So you partner with any projects that are not part of the CMA, the other 30-some that are not?
Well, twofold an answer to that question. The first is, yes, we partner with them. In a lot of cases, we acquire them. It gets to the point where that particular authority just cannot go it alone again. So what ends up happening is they have a huge amount of debt or future debt to construct a project. We assume all that. And then we also assume all their assets. So we get whatever's left. So if a plant needs to be upgraded, but the distribution lines or the collection lines are still an asset, that's what we gain, and we're able to at least keep it running until we can do an upgrade. But the 8 that I spoke about in this particular bullet point are 8 that we acquired. So the authority would then disband, or the private company would no longer exist. And we'll give you some examples as the presentation continues. Best way, again, I think for us to explain that is by case studies, and the proof is in the pudding. And being an engineer, I'm a data guy, I'm a numbers guy, and I think this is the easiest way to do it. I'm also a visual guy, so you're going to see a myriad of pictures that we're very proud to show. In 1991 to 1905, probably was our largest expenditure, and this wasn't a single project at one time. It was a course of actually 3 projects. But it was the potable water system was in dire need of complying with the Safe Drinking Water Act. So this is where we went from taking water out of reservoirs, going by a real small brick building type of treatment system, hit it with a little chlorine, hit it with a little soda ash, and off it went. When it rained, the water got muddy. Well, you had a little bit of cloudy water downtown. That didn't go anymore. In 1986, the Safe Drinking Water Act required anyone with an open water supply, a reservoir, stream, river, that would have to have one of 2 choices. Either build a filtration plant capable of meeting updated regulations, or convert to deep groundwater wells. So some communities were able to do what we did and that was construct these large multi-million-dollar treatment facilities that are based on physical chemical treatment and filtration, which is the blood and guts of what drives these treatment systems. Or some have abandoned their reservoirs and gone and drilled deep water wells, which require less treatment. So between 1991 and 1995, the Mount Laurel, Broad Mountain, and Indian Run treatment facilities. Mount Laurel is located adjacent to Schuylkill Mall, right off of Route 81. Broad Mountain is just north of St. Clair. When you're coming on 61, you see our little old brick building with our name on it, Schuylkill County Municipal Authority. That's what it looks like today, a little different. And Indian Run is tucked on the west end of Pottsville between the Sharp, at the base of the Sharp Mountain. It also allowed us to be able to change our hydraulics. We were able to add 7 new tanks into our system that provide the hydraulic gradient and water that serves as public water as well as fire protection for a lot of these communities, as well as a lot of the commercial and industrial. What that did was it also added sustainability to existing systems. So in this case right here, $41 million, we didn't gain a new customer. Well, part of that, and we'll get into that, was gaining new customers, but the driving force was to keep our existing. And you know, this is Yingling Brewery, Schuylkill Medical Center, Honeywell, Excel, and I just picked a few, St. Clair Industrial Park. These were existing customers of ours that we had to sustain and keep, but it took a $41 million investment to do that. What it also did was it allowed us to expand our service area, and this was probably one of the most significant as far as Schuylkill County Municipal Authority. We were able to construct a facility, our Mount Laurel facility, just behind the Schuylkill Mall. And what that did was allowed us to provide potable water to Federal Correctional Institute at Schuylkill, which is located out off the Minersville interchange, SCI Frackville, and SCI Mono. You're talking about 3 huge employers in the county right there. Again, pushback in the beginning. I remember the not in my backyard with the prison and fear of prison breakouts. Well, that went away real quick when everyone in this room either probably knows someone, is related to someone, has a friend of someone that works in one of the correctional institutes. And that's just how it is in our culture. But that was a huge, huge advancement for us. It provided an opportunity for us to have an exposure in the northern part of the county on the 81 corridor. And we'll show you what we did with that. But what it also did was provided development, Schuylkill Mall. Everyone's familiar with some of the commercial activity up in that area, from the AA Auto Parts, Cracker Barrel, McDonald's. That's all SCMA water that wouldn't have been there before without us. 1997 to 2000, another $4.8 million, Tremont Water and Well 15. Tremont was in trouble. They faced the same Drinking Water Act as everyone else. They were on an old reservoir system, had next to no treatment, an owner that was aging in health that owned Tremont Water and Gas. They were looking down the barrel of millions and millions of dollars of investment. SCMA acquired Tremont Water and Gas. We were able to construct a facility at Route 209 and 81, drinking water facility, provide additional groundwater wells downtown. And what that did was it opened up the 209 and 81 corridor, Big Lots, and up on the 209 and Roush Creek Road, another large supplier of service and an employer in the county. Wouldn't have been there without us. Downtown, Richmond Screw, another aging facility, but we sustained it with being able to provide that potable water. In the year 2000, a little over another $500,000, the New Boston Water Association. Again, a small community. That's literally a picture of their old tank. It was a Petticoat Junction, wooden storage tank right in downtown New Boston. That's no lie. That's an actual picture. It was, it turned into an iceberg in the winter. They had no control. It would fill and overflow. They had no way to control when water was in it or not in it. When it would leak, they used roofing tar to patch it. Not NSF drinking water approved, as you can imagine. So what we did was, when we extended our line out to SCI Monoway, we were 3/4 of the way there. So when the call beckoned, it only took $500,000 to run that line out, and now we're almost out to the Route 54-81 interchange. 1997 to 2000. Although not in terms of dollars, But in terms of success, this was probably one of the most successful projects SCMA has ever embarked on. Schuylkill High Ridge Business Park came from a master plan on paper to fruition. And it turned into probably one of the most prolific economic development decisions that this county has ever made. And Frank can chime in anytime he wants on this. What we did in support of that project was we already had the water line out into the Federal Correctional Institute. We also supplied sewage by building the Gordon treatment plant at the bottom of the hill to provide sewage for the Federal Correctional Institute back in the early 90s. What that did was, again, open up the opportunity. Now we have a 5,000 acre park. Frank, am I correct on that? 3,000 acre park that now has the ability to recruit customers. Hey, we have public water. Hey, we have public sewer. Hey, we have plenty of electric capacity. We also have a gas line. That's the driving force that's able to make these kind of projects come to fruition. So High Ridge came from, I remember the old plans. So in some of the original strategic planning sessions, we were able to construct water storage and work with the governor's action team to recruit. Lowe's was the driving force. That was one of the first customers in the park. But what that's turned into is a partnership with SEDCO to work with DCED to get grant money that was able to build additional storage tanks using grant money. The expansion of the park to Keystone East, 3,500 new jobs. Dovetailing on that was in 2004, we expanded that system so much we actually had to expand our Mount Laurel treatment plant. What that allowed us to do was add additional capacity to serve High Ridge. The Wegmans, the Gordon Foods, the Prologis, the Sara Lee's, the hotel, the Country Inn and Suites. 2008, we're back in Tremont again. Tremont's water system we acquired, but their wastewater system was still chugging along, little train that could, Tremont Municipal Authority. And again, this is no knock on these guys, on these types of systems. There's a level of pride, there's a level of parochialism a lot of times with these smaller communities. You know, there's grandfathers that were the original board members, and there was uncles, and there was cousins and brother-in-laws that ran the plant, and you know, hell or high water, they're going to continue to run the plant, and it's our plant, and we don't care if we're losing money, it's our money, and that's the mentality. Well, it comes to a point where, again, here we are in 2008, Tremont needed a significant upgrade, couldn't have the financial backing, so we acquired them. So we were able to build an expansion to their plant, which again provides sustainability, and took a non-compliant system to a compliant system. In 2010, this was a private, and Darlene, this is where I wanted to go with answering your question. It's not always a public municipal authority. Sometimes we work with privates. The Pine Brook system down in the area of the Pine Brook townhomes, but also they are the wastewater purveyor for the Deer Lake Industrial Park. The water system, we were able to get in there and do some minor upgrades and maintain compatibility and maintain sustainability for sure. And took a non-compliant system to a compliant system and was able to retain and keep those jobs in the Deer Lake Park, as well as provide an opportunity for additional development in the 61 corridor. 2010, we took on a huge debt with the acquisition of the Branch Cast Regional Sewer Authority. And we'll judge my audience here. Chris Bentz, very integral and part of that. Chris is with Benish Engineers, who is our consulting engineer of record. Benish was involved with Branch Cast to build the original plant, to build a lot of the original collection systems. And again, hats off, they took two communities, combined together a regional sewer authority. They thought they could do it alone. They thought they wanted to be in the sewer business, and they found out it's tough, and it's hard to sustain costs and treatment doing it independently. So we finally, after a few bites at the apple, we finally got into an agreement where we made a successful acquisition, and we were able to take out $50 million of debt for them, and that plant was already constructed, but we're able to fold those operating costs into the authority. And this is where I could drill down a little deeper on, well, you know, does SCMA have a magic wand, or do we have this magic crystal ball that we wave over to reduce costs? And the answer to that is no. But the answer is, when you have each of these individual municipal authorities in each company, that takes, in some cases, a manager. It takes a staff. It it takes a clerical, it takes a billing, it takes a solicitor, an engineer, an accountant. Not that we're trying to take food out of anyone's mouth in the service area, but we have all that, and we do that every day with a full staff of 41 employees, and we do it every day for a living. And we're able to do it more efficiently, and we're able to roll 1,500 customers or 2,000 customers in, and we may bring on the plant operator that has all the specific knowledge of that plant, or if there's a staff member that is a billing clerk that has all the knowledge of that system, we'll bring them on as hirees to the authority, but we're able to do it at such a reduced operating cost. Back to the branch gas, that was a new plant that was built in 2004, and again took a non-compliant system to a compliant system. 2010 to 2014, another biggie, 16 million bucks. This was an environmental regulation. Most of our dams were built between 1896 and 1930. It was done well before the EPAs and the DEPs and the permits of the world were needed to be had. In today's day and age, it's probably safe to say that it's nearly impossible to build a reservoir the size of some of ours in today's day and age due to the environmental permitting that's required. That being the case, they keep tightening up the regs for those existing dams. Even though our dams, we felt, were built like iron fortresses, and we found out essentially they are, which is a great feeling to have, they do take tweaking, and they do take additional upgrade. So what we did was we were forced to, per regulation, to upgrade our Pine Run Reservoir, our Indian Run Reservoir, our Mount Laurel Reservoir, and our Coffin Reservoir to the tune of almost $17 million. Now with that, the good news is that we have a warm and fuzzy that the dams aren't going to break and the downstream isn't going to get flooded, and obviously the loss of life or any of those catastrophes have a very low priority of happening. The bad news is that doesn't gain us one additional customer, one additional account, one linear foot of street and additional service area. So that's a large nut to crack. That's simply an investment back to the authority. Getting back to the partnerships, we had a huge support from the local government, county government, and our local legislators and our local senator that were able to beckon the powers that be that were able to secure grant money for that project. So we were able to secure 12 out of $16 million in grant. In fact, the announcement of that project was huge because it was a term for DEP to start enforcing long overdue letters that were written to all these dam owners. Every year you do a dam inspection, every year you know, and you get a nasty grant for DEP. Well, they finally started enforcing it. And when they announced it, it was actually Governor McGinty, Katie McGinty. She did the press conference on the breast of the Mount Laurel Reservoir up in northern Schuylkill County. So we were, again, a poster child for that endeavor. Back to our projects case studies, 2014, Deer Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant. Now we're getting into some projects that some of you may be familiar with. First of all, it wasn't us that was responsible for all the transportation debacle in southern Schuylkill County. That was the PennDOT project that was done in concert with it. But back to the partnerships, what we were able to do was we were able to align the timing of that project with the PennDOT project. We were able to bid it at the same time, and some of those contracts in the PennDOT job were successfully bid with our job, which was able to reduce money. So the same contractor that was working on the road was the contractor that was putting a lot of our new pipelines in. That project included a new wastewater treatment plant, and this is just west of the intersection of 895 and 61. It included 3 pump stations, 12 miles of collection lines, and that was another acquisition. The Deer Lake Municipal Authority had been a failing system. The plant was built in 1973. It had reached its useful life. It was completely over capacity, and we were able to step in and make a huge upgrade and essentially a brand new plant. We were able to salvage some of the components of the previous plant. But what we did was, again, in this business, it's real simple. Back to the SCMA magic wand, there is none. 2 ways to survive in this business. Raise rates or expand your service area. No one wants to hear the raised rates. So the other key component is to expand our service area. Previously, the Deer Lake Municipal Authority was a municipal authority created under the Deer Lake Borough. They did not have the authority to serve in West Brunswick Township or outside of the borough lines. Enter County Municipal Authority, we do have that ability to serve outside of the borough limits. And what we're able to do is expand that along the Route 61 corridor north all the way to the recent development at the former Deer Lake Drive. What we're also able to do is expand that out the 895 corridor toward Auburn, where we're able to pick up some existing and new development. Some of the facilities out in the Auburn Industrial Park, FedEx, on Nova. And then also 61, if you build it, they will come. No sooner do we start that project, we had Geisinger, Riverview Bank, Carmelo did a huge upgrade at his Roman Delight restaurant, Deer Lake Pub. All these facilities are now in a reinvestment and an economic development mode. Why? Because of the availability of utilities. The Deer Lake project overview, I did throw this map in just to kind of highlight it. This is Route 61 and this is 895. Our plant's located right where that little red mark is there. But the 61 corridor, as the comprehensive plan shows, that is one of the two main corridors that is susceptible to additional development. But it can't go without utilities. That whole corridor, which is one of the busiest in southern Schuylkill County, never had public water or sewer. Now, as part of this project, does have public sewer, and we're working on public water. 895, Auburn had their own municipal authority, and they still do successfully, but all they do is collect it and pump it to Deer Lake. But all the development in between here was never connected to that sewer system. So we're able to collect it, put a pump station in, forge an agreement with Auburn Municipal Authority to purchase capacity of their force main to pump it back down to our plant at Deer Lake. So getting back to those partnerships is critical. Unfortunately, it takes time sometimes, and it takes politics, and it takes a foreseeable future where you got to step back and look for the long term instead of looking for the short term. The Deer Lake project is something we're super proud of at the authority. Again, a $21 million investment is not something that you can take lightly. And is it an investment that's black and white and we're making money on it today? No. But we have a real good study and a real good feeling that someday down the road we certainly will turn that around. It's happening already. As part of the project, we have two housing developments that are already in the final review stage. One is the Farino and Finelli development. Finelli is the development out front with Geisinger and Riverview. Farino is planning on 220 units of apartment units, and the first phase is going to be 110 of those. That's a need in the county right now. The whole townhouse and the whole single-family home and sprawling front yard for everybody to cut grass on the weekend, those days are swinging. People want to have an apartment, no maintenance, and that's the trend right now. So that's a project that's in its final review stage in West Brunswick Township. Now we have a way to treat their water and we have a way to treat their sewer. Just south of there is International Custom Homes. It's Joe Udicello is the owner of that company. He's worked with Farino and Finelli to share some of their utility infrastructure costs to connect to us. That is the townhouse and single family. So they've kind of worked and felt off each other on providing not the same need that they're going to be competing against each other, but we have townhouses, we have apartments, we have single family homes. But again, critical component of that project. Would have never even dreamed about starting it unless you had water and wastewater utilities. Back to our proud. We have to give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back. We were award recipients for that project. We were recognized by the governor of Pennsylvania for that project. We won the Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence last year. We recognized at a beautiful dinner event down in Harrisburg. And we were also recognized by the Pennsylvania Rural Water Authority, one of our associations in our industry, as the Wastewater System of the Year in 2014, and by this group for our Employee Expansion and Excellence Award by the Manufacturers Association. Finally brings us up to the present. This is our most recent project that we're completing. It's in 2015. We put it online this year, and it is the Monterey Business Park water line and tank. If anyone travels the Route 81 corridor between Frackville and Monterey City interchange, you see a conveniently shaped storage tank that resembles a golf ball on a tee, and that would be SCMA's tank. We were able to work with some of the developers out there to get some additional logos put on. So we have the Mountain Valley logo on 1/3, the Mainstay Suites on the other, and then on the first slide you guys saw, we have our SCMA logo facing the business club. That project consisted of 21,000 feet of water line and 500,000 gallon water storage tank. What that did was provide potable water for the New Boston residents that were not included in the original New Boston Association acquisition of 1996. For those locals that know what we're talking about, it's the Maria Road. It's the newer homes up on the Maria Road between New Boston and 81 that were never connected. They faced drought problems, they faced water treatment problems, they all had water softeners, they ran out of water in their private wells when it was a drought situation. So that was part of the driving force to be able to secure grant money for that project, that it was an environmental issue we were solving, as well as an economic development issue to be able to provide water out to the park. The park, a little different, but it's what we're talking about there is the 81-54 corridor and surrounding area. What we're able to do is, again, solve a lot of those similar problems to FabCon, Corsicana bedding, and we picked up some of the small guys, again, on the way out, Skytop Bowl and Sunoco gas station, those type of facilities. What it also did was promote yet another kickstart to the 400-acre site on the east side of 81 in that area. That's a project that's we've tried to take as a county and an economic development corporation that have had the fish on the hook twice, and they spit them out thanks to the tank and the economy. But that's a 400-acre site that's primed for development. It's one of the last sites that's developable on the 81 corridor from Wilkes-Barre to Harrisburg, and that's one that Frank and the Development Corporation and the county commissioners and the local legislators are working hard daily with the DCED and Governor's Action Team and everyone else to try and make that project a reality. We're one step further and one step closer now that we have public water out there. The next solution is going to be public sewer, which we're actively working on, and I think once that comes, I think you're going to see some action on that site. Give you a map representation of it. This would be the 81 corridor. This is Route 54 here, Borough of Monterey City, and this is the small village of New Boston. Our former water line ended at the west side of New Boston. There was a small distribution system to take care of these customers. What we did was extend 21,000 feet of line out to Maria Road, all the way out, and picked up the village of Vulcan, small community in that area. But what it did is it provided the public water for this whole arena right here where FabCon and Corsicana are located. Right across the street, adjacent to the golf course, is the 400-acre site. It was actually a private airport before, meaning it's a nice flat spot on the top of the mountain, which is why it's so developable. The construction costs and literally the excavation costs for a site that big are minimized just because of the topography and the demographics in this area. You know, if you're on the side of the hill trying to make a 400-acre site versus on the top of a flat airport making a 400-acre site, your development costs are down, which is why this project is so attractive to some. Current projects that we're working on, we're successful with yet another Penvest project. Riley Township water line is in the final design stages and going to be going out to bid soon on 27,000 feet of water line from our existing Tremont system, working in an northeasterly direction, I guess it would be, to the village of Newtown. It's going to be a 21,000 gallon storage tank. It's going to provide potable water and fire protection to the village of Newtown. We're very successful in this project due to the environmental constraints. The folks at the village of Newtown had horrendous water, no other way to say it, with some of their private wells. They have unpermitted old sanitary septic systems on small lots that are contaminating their drinking water wells. We were able to, again, forge that partnership and had the legislators and senator and county government pushed hard for this project, and we're able to secure a $3.2 million grant and a $485,000 loan. That's a small payback on a big project for a small number of customers. But what that's also going to do is now we're out to Route 25. Now we're not far away from 81 and 25, where Keystone Potato and CDS landfill are. So if you can kind of gain the picture here, we look at things acutely to solve a problem, but we also look at it globally and regionally and long term, that hopefully someday we'll be able to market Route 25 and Route 81 as a commercial corridor. SMA meter and tank upgrade project in 2016. Again, this is another one of those similar to the dam rehab projects, a little bit different. We're going to replace 11,000 of our residential meters, and we're going to rehab 3 of our water storage tanks. Again, back in the early 90s, these tanks were built just like anything. They need to be maintained, they needed to be repainted, they need some minor upgrades, some structural deficiencies with them. So a little bit different. Hopefully we're going to get a little bit of a recoup on our new meters. Meters typically don't fail by reading high. Usually they fail by reading low, which is dollars going through the meter that we're not capturing. So part of that is to generate additional revenue. But again, in addition to that, there's another regulation that came out, and it was the Lead-Free Act. While our old meters have a certain amount of lead content in them, regulations changed now, where if we take a meter out, we're no longer allowed to put that meter back in. If it's in there, it can stay in there, but if you take it out, you got to put one in that has less lead in it. So technology has changed, the use of plastic, the use of high-density polyethylene type meters instead of lead meters and brass meters. So that's another project that we're embarking on now. Another thing, and this is something that's near and dear to our employees here as well as our board members. Fine, Pat, you're up there bragging about your last 30 years of projects and the successes about them. Well, fine and dandy, but where are we going in the future? This is probably the most important project in my mind, is strategic planning and long-term financial planning. Again, what we're able to do with our board, and I do want to give kudos to our board. Our 7 board members have been selected by the county commissioners, and they've been selected for a reason. They're 7 of some of the most prominent businessmen in the county, and they think like businessmen. And this isn't a political hack authority that meets once a month. This is an engaged team of professionals that hire professionals and work full-time at this. And I think that's a winning combination. But with that, you got to look down the road. There's only 2 ways to go in business. You're either growing and you're expanding and you're meeting the curve that never ends, or you're going in the direction that you don't want to go in. You never get to that point where, whew, okay, we just painted that last tank, now we're good, we're okay. Well, you never get there. So what we always want to do is look at new projects, look at how we can optimize, look at how we can become more efficient. So with that, we're involved right now in a huge asset management and maintenance upgrade project. Asset management and maintenance, sometimes again, it's not the most fruitful, but it's super important to take care of what you already have. We can't always be out there expanding and looking for new expansion. You got to take care of your own house first. So that's something that we're looking at. We're always looking for additional potential acquisitions. As our board has often said, we'll listen to anyone. So we have a number of lists of municipalities that we've had initial meetings with. And again, they're informal meetings. A lot of times we just like to go out and educate folks, because when you are a small authority that does only meet once a month and you don't even get paid to be on the board, that's a lot to ask for somebody to show up once a month in the back room of a fire hall and in an hour cover a month's worth of business with no full-time employees. And these guys are tasked with millions of dollars of decisions that are going to be put onto their neighbors that they see at the grocery store and when they're pumping gas in town. And it's a tough position. It gets to the point now where it's hard to get people to run for these elected positions or assume appointees to these positions. So we're constantly out there educating folks and helping them. And sometimes help is just educating them on maybe a little different way to look at some things. We're not the bully. We're not out there trying to monopolize and put people out of business. But when folks fall on hard times, be it financially or environmentally, we're here to help. And finally, our expansion of our, wrong button, our expansion of our service area, again, which is something that we're always looking at doing. The future, where do we go from here? Many challenges that we face, not only as Schuylkill County Municipal Authority, but all of the other smaller authorities. And that's an extraneous development and expansion costs. The environmental regulations today just get tougher and tougher and tougher. And that could be additional parameters that you have to sample for and laboratory costs. It could be different systems that have to be in place physically and mechanically at your plants that have to require upgrades and expansions. And increasingly stringent regulatory requirements. Again, and this is not only at the plant level, it's out in the distribution system on the water side, it's out in the collection system on the wastewater side. These regulations are developed nationally at the federal level by the Environmental Protection Agency. They're then transferred for enforcement to the local Environmental Protection Agency, in our case DEP. So EPA makes the snowballs and DEP throws them. And we unfortunately have to either catch them, duck out of the way, or get blasted with them. That's not going to change, and we recognize that. Increasing cost of services, I don't have to tell this from, you guys see it every day as employers and manufacturers. The costs, short of the fuel going down this past year, other than that, everything else has exponentially risen over the years, and it's not going to stop. A significant cost to expand our service area. You know, again, the low-hanging fruit has been taken. The populated areas where you can do a project and gain a bunch of customers and a lot of customers for a small project cost, they're all chewed up and they're all over. Now it's the areas where you have to put 10 miles of pipe in to get a handful of customers, and that's where the cost per user and the return rate on those investments thwart a lot of development in certain instances. So that's certainly a challenge that we always have. The lack of state and federal subsidy to assist in the infrastructure development. And again, this goes back to the condition that unfortunately our Commonwealth is in right now. And I'm sure Neil Goodman doesn't want to spend his Christmas down in Harrisburg with Jerry Knowles and Mr. Kovash and Mr. Argyle as well. But we are in an economic state right now where the grant money just isn't there. It's ultra competitive to get these grants, and they're hard to come by. What's super important, again, is to maintain and upgrade our existing infrastructure, and this is a point that I hit before, but I want to reinforce it. You know, looking around the room with some of the participants in today, you know, we have the Mrs. T's of the world, we have the Polyplastics of the world. And, you know, hopefully, obviously I'm missing folks here, but these are existing customers. These are existing success stories in our communities that we need to remain successful and be a vital part of the community. So maintaining what we already have is as important or more important than even expanding our facilities. But what that does is it's going to retain the jobs, and we're going to take care of our existing investors and stakeholders. Last point, regionalization, regionalization, regionalization. We have 67 counties in Pennsylvania, 68 municipalities in Schuylkill County. Do the math. And I think we're a little aggressive when we say there's 150 residents in Schuylkill County. I don't think there is. But think about that. We have parochialized ourselves and remain parochialized to have 68 separate municipalities for less than 150,000 people. Now we'll branch out of the water, wastewater, and infrastructure, but that goes school districts, police coverage, municipal services, roads that need to be paved, street lights that need to be maintained. And to do it at those compartmentalized approaches, it's a recipe for disaster, and it has to change. Individual authority consolidation is one of the recipes that we've found successful. And at first, it comes with resistance. It's the classic school district combination of so-and-so's uncle played on the undefeated 1958 team, and he's not going to give in, and they still have that, and that plaque's going to hold on to the wall forever. And, well, what are the colors of the team going to be, and what are we going to call, what's going to be our mascot if we join? Really, we're down to those trivial type of comments of the reason why we are totally thwarting ourselves with moving ahead as a community. And it's going to take change, and it's hard change. And again, it's not a knock, and I'm being very sarcastic, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to our elders and our fathers and the guys that did play on the 1950 and 1950. But those plaques are never going to come off the wall, and those success stories of the 70s, when these original authorities were formed and those original concrete plants were thrown in the ground and no one knew what wastewater treatment was, those successes are never going to be taken away. But it's important to recognize that we have to change to move forward. With the authority consolidation, comes back to the point that I drove home earlier, and that's the increased borrowing power and sustainability. And I'll repeat it again, the more hands, the lighter the load. It's math. It's not emotion, it's not magic power, it's math. And it's very simple. Reducing operating costs and keeping user rates economical is also important, because once you do get into those competitive types of situations, these large corporations, before they make a multi-million dollar investment, they're drilling down to see what their future operating costs are going to be. And if we're able to keep our costs sustainable and the rates economical, that's just another chip that we can use to attract and keep economic development. That pretty much ends my discussion, and hopefully it's going to initiate more discussion through this group.